Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have an unexpected video for you. Basically, a fortnight ago I recorded a Woolgathering video, and in my latest Woolgathering video I said that I was scrapping that video, but for whatever reason it's lingered in my head. I think that I keep thinking about my hair in that video, and I keep thinking about some of the things that I discussed, and whilst some of what I said might be a bit repetitive, I have decided that I want to share that with you all. Therefore, I found the video that I deleted and I have decided to edit it and share it here. I did mention about how I think some of the points aren't as coherent as I had hoped, but I'm hoping that it will actually be a fun ride. In any case, you'll get to judge my ever-changing hairstyles. I'm lying there at 1 o'clock in the morning when I usually tend to have an existential crisis. And I'm listening to pop music because I can't get to sleep and I think that I may as well. And I had an epiphany. I didn't plan on making a video today, but I showered this morning and I might as well try and achieve something. So yes, this video comes from the fact that at 2 o'clock this morning I was still awake, still scrolling through Twitter to see what was happening on RuPaul's Drag Race, and yes, I was seeing what was happening on RuPaul's Drag Race and seeing people get irate and wondering how I'd feel when I eventually got to watch it myself this morning, whilst also having this crisis about the fact that I had just been listening to pop music and various other sad songs for about 4 hours. Now, I think we all have these moments where we tend to navigate towards sadder forms of media. And for whatever reason last night, I ended up going in search of a song again. Now, we're going to go back a year to my friend's birthday on the 18th of January 2020. He had invited me. It was a complete washout. I shouldn't have gone, but I heard a great piece of dialogue that I stole for a novel, and there was a really good song being played by the DJ. Now, I remember this song simply because he played it after Moona's #1 fan, which is a favourite song of mine, and all I remember about the song, because I was a bit inebriated at the time and I didn't think to type anything on my phone, was that before the chorus it went I, and then I again, and went higher, and that has been stuck in my head for over a year trying to find it. Someone shared a video in which they featured a clip of a Billie Eilish song, and I found it, I listened to it. It wasn't that song, but this set me on this journey then of trying to find the song again before eventually just falling into the familiar trap of listening to sad songs. I'm sat there and I begin to question why sad songs and songs about heartbreak in particular seem so universal and seem to be something we all navigate towards. To talk about my writing history, when I was about 15, I started writing lyrics. Now, I think that every angsty teenager writes lyrics of some sort that are supremely bad. I was doing it to go alongside a young adult story I was writing at the time. In that, this girl was creative as well as being magical. The biggest Mary suit you could imagine. Don't worry, when it eventually came around to editing that book, I did remove all of the lyrics and just have it with her ripping off Buffy season 5. But for the most part, I got into writing lyrics because of that book. And then I actually found that I rather liked the medium. One of my biggest regrets is not being able to play any sort of instruments so that I could actually be able to craft some sort of songwriting skills around here. But I have always turned certain life experiences into lyrics, and naturally with that you get some of this heartbreak, you get some of the love's lost, and the idea of me actually writing anything about love and love being something that worked is strange to me now indeed. There were enough things that happened throughout the teenage years that I have quite a large amount of lyrics. Indeed, I have an entire section folder on my computer dedicated to them. I shared 12 Days of Our Charlie last year, which was sharing some of the lyrics that I'd written last year and then some of my favourites that are stuck in my head. But one of the main things, and I nearly fell into the trap of it last night, of writing more lyrics, is just this constant writing of ballads and writing of sad songs. And as I'm sat there listening to Fletcher's If I Hated You for about the 100,000th time, that's a lie, I think I've probably only listened to it about 10 times in the last month, is that for whatever reason, we seem to romanticise heartbreak. And I began to question just why we do that. I do believe that most things in life are important for us to experience. I think that definitely heartbreak is one of those things. I don't understand why we do it. And I wondered whether anyone would like to shed some light as to why we do tend to romanticise heartbreak so much. Why the movies that we look to and the scenes that, like, some of the best scenes we think about in literature and we think about in film are when people have had some sort of heartbreak, where there's been some sort of betrayal and there's a confrontation about that. Are there any happier moments that we might hold to bigger esteem than those moments of heartbreak? Also, I should blame some Italian pop music for this, because definitely the song... Alright, I'm just going to go through like a list in my head of songs that I was listening to last night and talk about... Not necessarily talk about them, but you could kind of join me in the sort of mood that I was in to maybe figure out what exactly was going on. So I went straight to Emma, an Italian artist I discovered last year, who also performed at Eurovision. She judged the X Factor last year, and she was in a film last year in Italy that I still mean to watch on Amazon Prime. And two of her songs that are my favourites of hers are both ballads, despite the fact that she has an entire wealth of music and albums out there. One is L'amore non mi basta, which riffs on Try by Pink, and Mi parli piano, which I believe says you've been talking for me too long or something like that. Anyway, these songs are both sad songs that discuss love and heartbreak. As I said, I mentioned Fletcher's If I Hated You. Then we had Kissing Other People by Len and Stella. And maybe it was just a thing of like going towards like these younger female artists who are also just beginning to navigate early adulthood. I don't know. Maybe romanticising heartbreak also helps us to kind of navigate it ourselves, because it centres us and makes us think, do you know what, actually, it's something we all experience. It's okay. We're going to get through it eventually. I mean, look at this. Britney Spears is performing. What did she do? I don't know. She did Stronger, didn't she? And after every time, we got some good songs, I think. I don't know. I kind of stopped following her career. Who else could I have mentioned? I don't know. Even Lana Del Rey. Like, I'm not the biggest Lana Del Rey fan, but I only ever seem to listen to her sad songs. Old Money, God Knows I Tried, and Gods and Monsters. You know, anything where she's talking about life being a bit melancholy. Even if I mention Moona, who's song #1 fan. Great song, by the way. I tend to go for, like, I Know a Place, Stay Away, Everything. The saddest songs they have. Like, I seem to seek them out. Although I did say about Taylor Swift's album Folklore that the only song on there that I liked was the one she did with Bon Iver. Is it Exile? I don't know. I don't know what it's called. But either way, it exists. And I remember ranting to my mother about the fact that you can always seem to get me with a good sad song. Anyway, we've had 10 minutes of me talking about romanticising heartbreak, and I was doing that at 2 o'clock in the morning, which was about 12 hours ago, and I still haven't figured out why we do it. Is it a good thing? Am I going to ever stop doing it? Because I'm now at the age of 28, and it seems to be the only thing I ever do. Even then, moving on from that, I ended up thinking more about, in terms of writing lyrics, and how when we write lyrics, obviously, they're a bit one-sided. You rarely see the other side of the story, which is fine. I have no problem in that. But it did get me thinking about anti-heroes and villains again, and the villain of the piece. I can't remember why I wanted to talk about this. I think I'd been influenced maybe by all of the dramas on television I used to watch when I was a child, and I'd got it into my head that if you weren't like, say, let's go back to school here. Let's really bring the years back. Say you were in the same class as somebody and you weren't friends with that person, to not be friends with that person would then just make them an enemy, because it was like a binary. You were friends or you were enemies. There was no space in between. You couldn't just be an acquaintance. When at the age of 17 I upset some friends by saying I had no friends at school, I just had acquaintances, and outside of the school system we wouldn't actually get on with each other, which I think I kind of proved because I don't speak to anyone from high school. But it took quite a few years to recognise, oh, I remember why I had this thought now. This whole topic came about because of YouTube and Twitter, and I don't know where I found a Sharpie. But basically, I noticed a tendency recently to, if someone has an opposing opinion to you, deciding that they are an enemy, and rather than just thinking, actually, we have different views and we can get on with each other. That was where that thought came from. And then it took me back to thinking about school when that did happen. And I think that a lot of us have fallen into this binary recently where we can only see things as good or bad, friends or enemies. There's no thing there where actually sometimes you just know a person and there's no feeling there at all. There's no feeling of hate or love. There's no like or dislike. You don't know everybody, and that's fine. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think that a lot of the time when we're thinking about who we have surrounding us, if we're only surrounding ourselves with people who agree with us, then we might have a bit of a problem. Personally, outside of everything going on in the world at the moment, when I'm at work, I am working in like a really conservative area with some very conservative views. The people I work with constantly have opposing thoughts politically and socially than I do. As I mentioned, when my manager bought me the RuPaul's Drag Race colouring book, when she found out that I happened to like watching that show, it suddenly became a thing of, I'm worried about you, because I would never do drag anyway, simply because I have great admiration for drag queens, drag kings, and the entire performance aspect there. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and I am a very lazy person. Like, anyone who comes to like a workshop by Charlie for writing purposes, or anyone who comes to one of my events, knows that they are very lackadaisical and lazy, and they just move along as they move along. I don't have time to like be the person who's there trying to pinpoint everything. I don't have that kind of brain. So you think I'd want to try drag? No, I just happen to really appreciate the art form. It's why I purchased the Art of Drag book, to educate myself on something that I quite like to observe. But I use that to highlight the fact that these people have a very almost tunnel vision view of people. I think that a lot of folk in the world have forgotten that we contain multitudes, and they just want to be a friend or an enemy, and if you do one thing wrong, you're always going to be in the enemy category. And there's a lot about what a person might do, what one person might think of as wrong might not necessarily be what another person thinks of as wrong. And also, I will say that this whole school thing, like I remember it myself when I was younger, and now being 28, which isn't even, like, to be fair, it's no age in the grand scheme of things. My great grandmother lived till she was 98, and I'm beggared if you think I'm not going to try and outlive Coronation Street. When I was maybe 10 years younger, let's go for just 10 years, I can remember being in a similar boat as thinking that it was friends or enemies. You're with me, you're against me. I didn't really think of the whole thing of if you didn't know me, that was where it went. This followed me into work. I started working for the charity shop straight out of university. Now, previously, the manager that I first had, we didn't get on. I can't deny that. And everybody else, I at least tried to behave civilly. I don't mention any stories outside of that, don't mention names, don't mention work, or what went on. But then entering into the workplace from that, And you're getting to meet a lot of people, and you've got to work with a lot of people who are going to have opposing views to you. Now, honestly, like, I am always on the side of be kind. I am always on the on the side of live and let live. I've always been brought up to believe that just let people live their lives how they want to live their lives, as long as it isn't hurting anybody. Indeed, as I've got older, I've had to add the caveat, unless that person likes being hurt, because, there are some fetishes in the world. But we're not going to, deep dive into that today. It's only when I've started working and I've started having to talk to people who do have opposing views and maybe challenge them, I challenged the woman who came into my shop who was racist, and I mean, that didn't really go down well, because I didn't recognise that the other people who were at the shop at the time also happened to be racist, and they were on her side, and I was like, well, I guess nobody's going to be staying in my shop then, so all three of you are leaving. We did very poorly with customers. I have had people who work with me corner me and have a go at me about politics because they didn't like the fact that there wasn't a higher percentage for the EU referendum. I've had people who voted for the EU referendum who's told me that they don't care how it goes because they'll be dead before they see it, and so if it all goes tits up, they don't have anything to worry about. I know I mentioned that last year. And when I was younger, I know that these were people that I definitely would have seen as enemies because they were on the other side. But the thing is, you still have to work with them. And a person isn't just made up of political beliefs, even if you do disagree with them. They aren't just made up of religious ideologies. Now, there are definitely people in your life who you end up cutting out. I won't go into the depths of people that I have removed from my life, but I think specifically now, to relate it to the online culture, sometimes I think that folk have reached a point where they believe it's their opportunity and their need to say something defamatory, not to feel better maybe, but to kind of give a clear sense of their side. And sometimes it's just a case of, maybe say nothing, maybe take a moment, because I can guarantee you might regret what you're saying in a few years' time. Next, this week, let's talk, because I definitely rambled about that and didn't really get my point across as to what I was trying to say. I still haven't figured out how I feel about romanticising heartbreak, but this is what you get for somebody who didn't sleep last night. This week, there hasn't been much reading or writing done. Writing has been very bitty. Writing hasn't happened because of the subject that I'm writing about, and I'm trying to kind of properly mirror pathos with humour, and I'm hoping to be able to figure it out. I'm hoping to get across some of the sadness, but it's also difficult. I've been doing some more late night sessions with writing because I might not have been able to find the time during the day, which is strange to admit considering I now have all the free time in the world. However, reading hasn't happened this week either. Apart from reading my own book and vlogging the experience, I have nearly 2 hours worth of footage to try and cobble together and reduce down so that I have something to put out for the anniversary of An Heir to Murder on the 12th of February, which I believe is this Thursday. Oh, I've just remembered. This week, one of the things that has happened is that I have spent a lot of time binge watching Absolutely Fabulous. Remember the 90s sitcom with Joanna Lumley and Jennifer Saunders? It's something that has never appealed to me, and yet the last fortnight I sat on my computer, pressed play on the first episode, and then have just stuck with it, watching 1 or 2 episodes, or the one day when I sat and watched it for over 3 hours. It's very nostalgic for me because I remember my grandmother really enjoying this show the first time around, and it started when I think it came out the year I was born or the following year, so I never watched it, and I've never gone back and watched reruns of it. I remember the revival series and my nan watching that and being really excited about that, because I remember phone calls where she was notorious for ringing at the start of Coronation Street, but she wouldn't, and she'd disconnect the call if Ab Fab was on. Strangely enough, my grandmother's very funny when it comes to comedy. She introduced us to Little Britain, the TV show, and she introduced us to The Mighty Boosh. She really liked Ideal with Johnny Vegas, and she watched BBC Three religiously when I was younger because she'd got a Freeview box, and that was like the big thing. My cousin used to stay there a lot as well, so he was watching it, so she'd get into it. Yet now she's older and she refuses to admit she ever watched it. Like, I know that my grandmother watched Queer as Folk back in the 90s because it once got mentioned in a documentary that Russell T Davies was doing, and she was talking about the fact that she'd watched what was basically porn. Now, we don't talk about some of my grandmother's other ideals, but in terms of television, you can never trust her. She also only ever read to chapter 4 of Our Doris, which means that she's on a par with my dead grandmother. My dead grandmother read 4 chapters and then ended up blind, but this grandmother has no excuses. I think she just doesn't like it. Oh, well. She'd be the first to defend me, but blooming heck. So with Ab Fab, what I found about this show, though, is that the money that gets thrown around, the talk of fashion labels and the lack of work, I feel like it definitely mocks and pokes fun at the celebrity model culture of the 90s. It's filled with some jokes that really only fits the time, so it seems quite timely of the 90s, and it's this nostalgic quality that I found that I have appreciated. And saying something's nostalgic from the 1990s still makes me feel somewhat old inside. When I realised last week that it was nearly 20 years since I started high school, my heart broke. It might be it might only be 2 years away, 2.5 years away, and it'll have been 20 years. So currently it's only 18 years. It's only 18 years since I started high school at the moment, but it's close enough to 20. It's, you know, it can only get to 20. It can't go back. And so the further away I get from stuff, the older I recognise that I am. It's especially made worse when I find out certain popular writers at the moment happen to be younger than me, and I'm like, well, look at me, still living in the bedroom I've had since I was a child, when I stole it off my eldest brother. Still in the same bed I've had since 1993 because my grandfather made it for me, and upon his death my mother was like, well, we can never get rid of it, my father made that. I mean, to be fair, you wouldn't fit a bigger bed in my room anymore because of all my bookshelves, but still. This week, since we're here, and I may as well, I am hoping to get some more reading done. I'd really like to actually finish the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. I was hoping to actually get a lot more read. I wanted to read The Daughters of Henri, Legendborn, War Girls by Tochi Onyebuchi. I wanted to get through all of those fantasy novels that I have on my shelves this month. I wanted to read the BookTube prize books because I need to read those and judge them. But this week has just been this week, and this next week will be a different one. I want to write more, and I probably will try and steer clear of listening to songs about heartbreak. But do give me your thoughts on romanticising heartbreak and why you think that we do it. And, you know, try and make sense of what I was talking about with the whole like friends and enemies thing, and how it's not really such a strict divide. Sometimes there are just people you don't know, and it's okay not to know people, and it's okay not to know every facet of their person, and you don't need everybody to like you the same way they don't need everybody to like them. People just need to exist. That's it. Let's just leave things at that. Let people exist comfortably. That's what we should be working towards. But I think that that's me. I hope that you got something out of this video besides sheer boredom. And until next time, sorry, itchy nose, that is all.